No one shall ever know the truth behind that fateful day Archetype went forth to where the brilliant sword did lay. 'Twas the first of many feats so great, a legend through and through. We sing of him, Archetype, the noble and the brave. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. It's time to wrap up Patron Week with a topic courtesy of the holder of the Quasar Commander tier this month, and it's a theme I feel very connected to. Many of you know that I adore TCG exclusive themes, but Noble Knights are where it all began. Give or take a test tiger or two. Based on King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, this theme bonded a number of light and dark warrior monsters together to raise their liege to towering heights, arming them with a myriad of noble arms to handle a wide swath of situations. We've got a lot of cards to cover today, so let's crack open our storybook to familiarize ourselves with these characters, watch as the Arc of Destiny unveils their fates, and see what tales we can spin to avert this tragedy. Call upon your most stalwart companions, because it's time to venture forth with Noble Knights. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and what better way to travel down the road than on your Duel Runner? We'll be covering iconic 5D's characters along the way, and our next stop is 20K, where we'll start the Yusei Explained series, covering Stardust, Junk, and whatever other cards we can play to help us rev it up. We've also got a Discord, and normally I take this time to advertise it, but I just want to let you know that if you're watching this close to release, my 24-hour Halloween Spooky Scary Stream Spectacular is coming up this Sunday, October 31st, going all the way till noon on November 1st. We're doing viewer duels, raid duels, I'm making a husbando tier list, all kinds of good stuff, so make sure you tune in. And a Twitter where you can stay up to date on channel news and my bad takes. And if you really like what I do here, please consider joining my YouTube membership. It's basically like a Twitch sub, emotes included, or backing me on Patreon, where you can vote on a video that I make every month. It also gets you early access to my videos via the patron-only section of my Discord, provided I get the video done ahead of schedule. And whether you're a member or a patron, I get a schedule sent to you on the first week of the month, so you know what to expect for the next 4 weeks. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Noble Knights? Well, they're a group of light or dark warrior monsters whose identities have evolved as time has progressed. Initially, there was a big focus on normal monsters, but now they largely focus on the equipping and overall usage of noble arms. Now, some of you might be wondering why I left fire out of the listed attributes, and that's because we won't be covering Noble Knights in this video. While they all do count as Noble Knights, I already made that video a long time ago, so if you want to check it out, follow the link in the top right, and to see the ones released after their initial wave of support, check out the 2020 release roundup video. We'll begin with our level 4 Light Noble Knights, and there's no better place to start than with Noble Knight Archetype. They're a normal monster with 1800 attack and defense. While its older, more seasoned self is one of the deck's big payoffs, young Archetype sees substantially less play. While it's the only Noble Knight that's a true normal monster, thus granting it some minor synergy with other cards, its utility is at the bottom of the Noble Knight chasm, thus making them Archetype of the Abyss. Noble Knight Gawain has 1900 attack and 500 defense, and if you control a light normal monster, you can special summon Gawain from your hand in defense position. This card released shortly after Archetype and made for a nifty little rank 4 suite, which arrived just in the nick of time, as they were the perfect Xyz material for a monster that came out in the same set. Heroic Champion Excalibur. Coincidence? Probably. Noble Knight Dristan has 1800 attack and 800 defense, and while you control another Noble Knight monster, your opponent can't target your monsters with less than 1800 attack for cards or effects, except this card. Also, when a Noble Arms Equip spell is equipped to Dristan as a mandatory effect, you must target a face-up card on the field and destroy it, though this only triggers once per turn. There aren't very many Noble Knights with low enough attack to be covered by Dristan's protection, but it does protect monsters in general, so it can help with anything off-theme if they're under the attack limit. It's also just spot removal, which is pretty nifty. Now, they don't look like they have the frame to pull off that kind of destructive power, but don't worry, their loot gives them super strength. Noble Knight Gwalchavad has 1500 attack and 1800 defense, and they're treated as a normal monster while face up on the field. But when equipped with a Noble Arm spell card, they become an effect monster that can target any Noble Knight in your grave, add it to your hand, then destroy a Noble Arm's equip spell you control. Being able to recur your monsters is a pretty stellar effect, especially when we keep in mind that the Noble Arm's equip spells generally reattach after being destroyed once per turn, so it's just a +1. Unless you choose not to re-equip, which you may want to do if you got back Gawain with that effect. Since Gwalchavad is a normal monster without the equip, Gawain can pop out of the hand for your next rank 4. And also, if I may say, check out those gorgeous locks. Gwalchavad, more like Squalchavad, because they're the best looking guy here. Noble Knight Midrot has 1700 attack and 1000 defense, and they're treated as a normal monster while face up on the field. But when equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell, their level increases by 1, their attribute changes to Dark, and they become an effect monster that can, if you control no other monsters, special summon any Noble Knight monster from your deck in defense position, except another copy of itself, and if you do, destroy an equip spell you control. Midrot is one of our key Noble Knights, because if you have even a single Noble Arm available, then you not only gain the beneficial effect of any other Noble Knight, but can set up the Xyz summon of one of your bosses. They're an invaluable member of the team, as well as the most trustworthy. Right? Right? Noble Knight Boars has 1700 attack and 900 defense that, much like Midrot, is treated as a normal monster without a Noble Arms, but once equipped with one, gains a level, turns dark, and becomes an effect monster. This time, during your main phase, you can reveal 3 Noble Arms cards from your deck and have your opponent randomly add one of them to your hand, and the rest go to the grave. Very similar to Cosmo Tin Can. This is the perfect pair with Midrot. After summoning Boars and destroying your Noble Arms, that card can re-equip to Boars, giving you access to their effect. Then, as long as the Noble Arms you got off of Boar's effect can be equipped to Midrot, you've got rank 5 material all ready to go. Just be careful about what subjects you bring up around him. Boars is very attached to their oversized novelty cup and will take every opportunity to brag about it. Noble Knight Peridor has 1900 attack and 300 defense, but while equipped with a Noble Arms, they become a dark monster and increase their level by 1, though they aren't ever treated as a normal monster. And if sent to the grave while equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell, you can target a Noble Arms card in your grave and add it to your hand. This is the first knight we've run into that doesn't really synergize with any of the others. Sure, they can grow in level enough to make a rank 5 along with Midrot and Boars, but they don't have any kind of activated effect to advance your game plan. Rather, they're just a solid attacker, especially with the help of our arms, that can put one of your Noble Arms back in your hand if it's sent to the grave. Best case scenario, you can take the Noble Arms that was on Peridor, put it on another Noble Knight that you had, and then grab another Noble Arm out of your grave. There's even a trap card that they printed recently that you can get back with this, which I find immensely funny. And while it wouldn't be able to do that as part of your Xyz plays because Peridor wouldn't be sent to the grave, now you can use them for link summoning, which does trigger it. But I've spent a whole paragraph trying to explain how Peridor's effect went from barely usable to now kind of useful in a very specific circumstance as time's gone on, so honestly, I'd avoid it unless you're really starved for playables in your deck list. Oh, or if you need a really nice horse, that too. Noble Knight Brothers has 1200 attack and 2400 defense that can only attack if you control exactly 3 Noble Knights and no other monsters. When normal summoned, you can special summon up to 2 Noble Knights from your hand, but you're locked into only special summoning Noble Knights for the rest of the turn. And once per turn, you can target 3 Noble Knights and or Noble Arms cards in your grave, shuffle all 3 into the deck, then draw a card. I am so curious as to why this thing has an attack restriction. I mean, yeah, it's flavorful, it's got 3 knights in it, but why would you then give it only 1200 attack? Did the attack and defense values get switched at some point in production, but they just forgot to remove the restriction? I don't know. The takeaway here should be to never think about attacking with Brothers, and instead focus on its ability to essentially give you an infinite grind game. Used knights and arms can be put back into rotation while digging for cards you need to extend your plays before you overlay Brothers into a rank 4. But specifically a Noble Knight one, don't get crazy trying to use your newfound advantage to dip into the rank 4 toolbox, getting cards like Skyblaster Musketeer or number 101 Silent Honor Arc. The Brothers may be unwieldy, but they're loyal if nothing else. Noble Knight Bedivere has 1600 attack and 1500 defense, and when the card is normal or special summoned, you can send a Noble Arms equip spell card from your deck to the grave. And during either player's turn, you can target a Noble Arms equip spell and an appropriate target, and on resolution, equip that Noble Arms to the targeted monster, but you can only use this effect once while Bedivere is face up on the field. I remember when this card was about to come out, and it was posted that this card added a Noble Arms from your deck to your hand on summon, and I absolutely lost it. I was understandably disappointed, but it was an important lesson. Always wait to get your info from a reputable source. Mechanics-wise, Bedivere is okay. Throwing a Noble Arms into the grave sets it up to be retrieved by either of our Artorigus Xyz monsters, more on that in a bit, but we already have so many ways to set that up, so adding another way to do that without adding any utility means that Bedivere is a huge win in terms of flavor, but not so much when trying to build the best possible deck. The Noble Arms transfer is pretty cool though, letting one monster swing in with something like Gallatin's 1000 attack boost before swapping it to a different Noble Knight that's about to attack, adding a bit of extra damage output to your board. In effect, that's so powerful that they couldn't let Bedivere do it turn after turn. That's why Tailor of the Fickle is played in so many equip card decks after all, it's just too powerful. Noble Knight Custennin has 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and if you control a Noble Arms equipped spell, you can special summon them from your hand. And a Noble Knight monster that uses Custennin as Synchro, Xyz, or Link material gains an on-special summon effect that grants an additional normal summon of a Noble Knight monster, but you can't special summon from your extra deck for the rest of the turn except to summon Noble Knight monsters. This is one of our more modern Noble Knights, and it shows, because it helps patch up one of the problems the deck was struggling with: normal summon reliance. If Madrot or Brothers' effects got negated, then you didn't have many other options. But Custennin can not only show up to help make more monsters, but grants an additional normal summon to get even more effects going. Sure, the extra deck lock is frustrating, but if you're trying to play a pure version of the deck, then it's an easy Custennin include. Noble Knight Pelennor has 1900 attack and 500 defense, and they can target a Noble Arms equipped spell equipped to them and a face-up monster your opponent controls, destroy them, then draw a card. But Pelennor can't attack for the rest of the turn. Now this is the kind of utility I'm talking about. Since the Noble Arm is likely to re-equip, this effect is usually going to be a +2 in card economy. You draw a card and destroy a monster, your equip spell comes back, so you essentially lost nothing. And you can just have the Noble Arm re-equipped to another monster you control before folding Pelennor into an Xyz monster, so the no battle clause doesn't even mean that much. Oh my goodness, are we bringing actual modern card design to Noble Knights? That's Pelennor like it. Noble Knight Ivan has 1700 attack and 1600 defense, and if a Noble Arms equipped spell becomes equipped to them, you can special summon a Noble Knight token, which is a level 4 light warrior monster with 1000 attack and defense. I like to imagine the token is that big cat. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Noble Knights. And while equipped with a Noble Arms equipped spell, all other Noble Knight monsters you control gain 500 attack. Those are some pretty spicy effects, basically giving you the material you need to make Isolde, which can quickly get out of hand. Or it would if Ivan didn't limit you to Noble Knight summons. Now Isolde is relegated to only summoning fair monsters, and not being part of 30-step link summoning combos. Okay, all sarcasm aside, I really dig this card for pure builds, especially with that cool 500 attack boost turning a number of our Noble Knights, who were already decently statted by the way, into paragons of combat. It gives us the ability to go wide with Noble Knights, which is in stark contrast to the usual going tall mentality of our Xyz bosses, giving us some flexibility if our opponent stops our main game plan. Now let's go over some Noble Knights that don't have their devious side so hidden, our level 5 Dark Monsters. Ignoble Knight of Black Loncelin has 2000 attack and 800 defense, and you can send a face-up light normal monster you control to the grave to special summon them from your hand or grave. They can also tribute a Noble Knight monster to add a Noble Arms card from your deck to your hand, and you can only control one copy of Black Loncelin at a time. Artorigus' rival was, for the longest time, the only on-theme way to search your Noble Arms, and it came with a hefty price. You needed to have a monster to send to the grave for their special summon, and have material left over to tribute for the search, if you didn't want to tribute Loncelin themselves, which you can totally do if you want. Thankfully, since it can revive from the grave, you don't have to play too many copies to call upon it whenever you need, but our options for getting Noble Arms are better than they've ever been. So while I hate to give Loncelin more ammo for their revenge quest, it might be best to ignore this Ignoble Knight. Noble Knight Ector has 1600 attack and 2000 defense, and you can banish 2 Noble Knights from your grave to special summon Ector from your hand or grave. And a Synchro or Xyz summon of a Noble Knight monster that uses Ector as material can't be negated, and your opponent can't activate cards or effects when that monster is special summoned. This very much makes Ector the Dragon Ruler of Noble Knights, using monsters in your grave to summon a body that can help with further summons. And since you can do that from the grave, you don't have to run very many copies for them to be useful. Nowadays, Ector has been largely overshadowed by more modern cards that streamline the summoning process, but the ability to freeze your opponent after a summon is something that's yet to be replicated, and while the applications for it are narrow, it can have some very important usages. On top of making sure the summon isn't outright negated, there's a window after the summon where you can activate your effects and your opponent can't do anything about it. Those effects have to be quick effects for sure, but the same time where your opponent is not allowed to chain cards to your summon, think cards like Bottomless Trap Hole, is the same window that you now have complete control over. So if you have any trap cards that you were worried about getting hit by negation, that's the chance to use them. And why does Ector have this kind of effect? Well, I think it has something to do with Launcelin floating around in the background, and when you perform a Synchro or Xyz summon, Launcelin distracts your opponent by being spooky. We've also got a few main deck monsters that aren't Noble Knights, but share the same storyline and are meant to support them. The most notable of which is Gwynethar, Queen of Noble Arms. They're a level 2 light spellcaster monster with 300 attack and defense, and while they're in the hand or in the grave, you can target a Noble Knight you control and equip Gwynethar to them. The equipped monster gains 300 attack and gains one of two effects, depending on the equipped monster's attribute. If it's light, Gwynethar can be destroyed instead of the equipped monster, and if it's dark, it becomes something of a catastor, destroying the monster the equipped monster battled at the start of the damage step before destroying Gwynethar. With how important having Noble Arms equipped to your knights is, having one that essentially lives in your grave that can equip once per turn means you're always going to at least have one effect live. And this is something that younger Nova struggled with whenever he was first introduced to this. A lot of the Noble Knights say it has to be equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell, but Gwynethar's a monster. Monsters that are equipped like this are treated as spell cards for purposes like this, so it does count. If you are confused about that, trust me, I was right there with you. But no, it's totally legit. It does activate all the effects. Back to the video. This also has a number of other knock-on effects, like essentially getting the retrieval effect of Peridor without having to risk a real Noble Arms, or revealing Gwynethar off of Borz's effect because it is a Noble Arms card, and if Gwynethar is not selected, you essentially search 2 Noble Arms. It just goes to show that behind every great knight, there's a great queen keeping his shit together. Merlin is a level 3 dark spellcaster monster with 1400 attack and 500 defense, and they've got 3 effects. You contribute them to special summon a Noble Knight monster from your deck, but you can't special summon anything but Noble Knights the entire turn you use this effect, which means you better have normal summoned Merlin if you want the effect to work. And as a quick effect, you can banish Merlin from your grave to synchro summon a Noble Knight synchro monster using monsters you control, or banish Merlin from your grave as a quick effect to Xyz summon a Noble Knight monster using monsters you control. The application of these last two are pretty narrow. You could utilize the quick summon effect to dodge that interaction, or use it during the battle phase for more damage. But the main attraction is its first effect, essentially becoming any Noble Knight you need, at the expense of flexibility. This was particularly devastating in the old days, when you needed to tap into rank 4 and 5 options to cover things Noble Knights just couldn't do. But nowadays we have a bit more options, so it's not as painful. Also, Merlin's rocking a little dragon friend. How can you not play a card with a little buddy like that on it? Morgan, the Enchantress of Avalon, is a level 3 dark spellcaster monster with 1300 attack and 1600 defense. And when your opponent activates a card or effect, while you control a Noble Knight monster and Noble Arms equip spell, as a quick effect, you can send Morgan from your hand to the grave, and on resolution, destroy one of your Noble Arms equip spells, and if you do, negate the activation. So it doesn't destroy, but it is an Omni-Negate under the right conditions, so that's pretty neat. And once again, destroying the Noble Arms isn't even that bad because it's just gonna come right back. But it's not searchable, so it's about as likely as any other hand trap to show up, but the catch is you can use cards like Ash or Nibiru without a developed board. They're very similar to Subterror Fiendus in a lot of ways, but without being a legit on-theme card, relying on them is sure to spell your doom. Lady of the Lake is a level 1 light aqua tuner monster with 200 attack and 1800 defense, and cannot be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of a warrior type monster. And if used as material for a synchro summon, they get banished. When normal summoned, you can target a Noble Knight normal monster in your grave and special summon that target, and because the ones that pretend to be normal monsters only apply that effect while on the field, Base Artorigus is the only current valid target. Though, knowing my luck, they'll probably come out with a level 4 dark normal Noble Knight Launcelin card a couple days from now just to spite me. Also, while in the grave, you can target a level 5 Noble Knight monster you control, reduce its level by 1, and if you do, special summon a Lady of the Lake from your grave. I have So many mixed feelings about this card. You have to run vanilla Archetype to make the normal summon effect work, which is going to be down to player preference, but I'm not touching it. Otherwise, you need to find a way to put Lady in the grave, which is going to require some number of off-theme cards to accomplish. But once they're set up, Lady can essentially turn any of your level 5 nobles into the themed synchro monster. Though I do have to say that strange tuners lying in ponds distributing levels is no basis for a system of synchro summons. And the monster you'll primarily be making with Lady of the Lake is Ignoble Knight of High Loncelin, a level 5 Dark Warrior synchro monster with 2100 attack and 900 defense, requiring any tuner and a non-tuner Noble Knight monster as material. When synchro summoned, you can equip a Noble Arms equip spell from your deck to them, and at the end of the battle phase, if this card destroyed a monster by battle and sent it to the grave, you can add a Noble Knight or Noble Arms card from your deck to your hand. Gosh, I love this card so much. It grabs 1000 attack boost right out of the deck and gives you more advantage the more monsters you run over in battle. But it's just so hard to go into. Lady of the Lake demands you build around them in their own theme. You can't even splash in Renaud in a light-focused build because it only works with fire warriors. But despite all the hassle, I'm still probably going to be running a copy, because how can I not run a mythical medieval trader with laser red power armor, dual-wielding magic swords? That's my entire aesthetic. You know, aside from all the space stuff. But our Xyz monsters are where we truly shine, and while it's the newest, I wanted to start with Sacred Noble Knight of King Custennin. They're a rank 4 light warrior monster with 1500 attack and 2500 defense, requiring 2 or more level 4 Noble Knight monsters as material. They can detach any number of material, then target that many cards your opponent controls, and return them to the hand. And if Sacred Custennin is destroyed by battle or card effect and sent to the grave, you can special summon a Noble Knight Xyz monster from your extra deck, except another copy of itself, and if you do, attach Sacred Custennin to it as material. And this is counted as an Xyz summon. I really like this card because it's a great Xyz to start with if you're expecting to run into some resistance. Summon Sacred Custennin and threaten to bounce at least 2 cards, and if your opponent has destruction interaction or negation, they may stop the effect, but now you're going to go straight into your real bosses. It doesn't even say you have to control Custennin to trigger that effect, so even if they negate the summon, you can still keep going. Now, for the love of Merlin, please sheath that sword. This is the second time I've seen you waving that around, you're gonna end up hurting someone. Next, we have the heir of Pendragon themselves, Archetype, King of the Noble Knights. They're a rank 4 light warrior Xyz monster with 2000 attack and defense, requiring 2 level 4 Noble Knight monsters as material. When Xyz summoned, you can target up to 3 Noble Arms equipped spells in your grave with different names and equip them to this card. And once per turn, you can detach a material to destroy any number of spells and traps on the field, up to the number of Noble Arm equipped spells you control. This doesn't just count the ones attached to Archetype either, so feel free to pass out the swords as needed. Your opponent's back row won't be able to tell the difference. And thankfully, Archetype shows up to the party with quite a few of their own, provided you found a way to load them into your grave, which is part of the reason why Boars is so darn good. It hardly matters which arms your opponent ends up giving you after you Xyz summon, cause you'll be deciding how your armory looks. I also like imagining how Archetype is wielding those 3 swords. Like they've got to be grabbing one in each hand, and then the last one goes in their teeth. A very Roronoa Zoro of you, my liege. And I'm only mostly joking, given the art for Sacred Noble Knight of King Archetype. They're a rank 5 light warrior Xyz monster with 2200 attack and defense, requiring 2 level 5 Noble Knight monsters as material, which is why it's so important that Boars and Madrot can level modulate. Like their other Xyz forms, Sacred Archetype can equip up to 3 Noble Arms from your grave to itself when Xyz summoned, and once per turn you can detach a material to target another monster on the field and destroy it. And if Sacred Archetype is sent from the field to the grave, you can target a level 4 or higher Noble Knight monster from your grave and special summon it. Sacred Archetype is your main muscle when it comes to closing out games. They can clear unprotected threats, can challenge Obelisk with the right Noble Arms setup, and floats into another Noble Knight if need be. Honestly, it's hard not to feel like you're crushing it when you've got a 6 suit of glowing blue power armor while wielding 2 legendary swords. It's a good way to have some great medieval times. But they all pale in comparison to our last extra deck monster, the dynamic duo of Isolde, 2 Tales of the Noble Knights. They're a Link 2 Light Warrior Link monster with 1600 attack, requiring any 2 warrior monsters as material. If Link summoned, you can add any warrior from your deck to your hand, but for the rest of the turn, you can't normal summon, set, or special summon monsters with that name, nor activate their monster effects. Also, you can send any number of equipped spells with different names from your deck to the grave to special summon a warrior monster from your deck whose level equals the number of cards sent to the grave. Now, you probably know this card as a staple in Dark Warrior Link Spam decks, using its second effect to summon Octo Stretch by binning a single Phoenix Blade, giving you near limitless cards in hand to cover discard costs for things like Nightmare monsters. But in Noble Knights proper, Isolde can set up follow-up plays, searching you any knight you could want, and then summoning out another knight while filling up your grave with a plethora of arms for Artorigus to scoop up later. It's a shame that Isolde is another example of a card for a specific archetype being incorporated into giant combo decks because of a lack of restrictions, but at least it never got to the point where it got banned, keeping it away from the deck that needed it most. And best of all, that means that Noble Knights were integral pieces to some of the most decorated decks in the competitive format, making them a meta threat. No, I don't care if it was only a single monster in the extra, I'm going to feel vindicated, thank you very much. Okay, now it's time to talk about those Noble Arms equip spells everyone's been trying to get a hold of. In general, you can only equip them to a warrior-type monster, you can only control one of each, and once per turn, if destroyed while face up on the field, you can target a warrior-type Noble Knight monster you control and equip it to that target. First, we have Noble Arms Arfidutor. Once per turn, you can target a set card your opponent controls, and on resolution, the equipped monster loses exactly 500 attack, and if it does, you destroy the target, and the attack loss remains even if Arfidutor leaves the field, or if the monster becomes unaffected by card effects. This is probably the most interesting of the bunch, and while it makes your knights weaker while wielding it, there's a lot of good uses you can get out of this. For one, the attack loss doesn't matter if you plan on using the equipped monster as material, so that's not much of a problem. You can also use it to help scout back row, or just clobber face down defense position monsters. Though, be careful, since the effect specifies you have to destroy that target, which means it has to meet all the targeting conditions on resolution as well. So if you target a face down back row and your opponent flips it in response, it's not going to be destroyed, so their summon limit will be safe. Though I also want to highlight that while this effect is once per turn, it's not a hard once per turn, which means you can only use the effect once, no matter how many copies of it you have available. But because it's a soft once per turn, you can use Arfidutor's effect, use something like Madrat's effect, blow up your sword, and when it re-equips, it's treated as a new instance of Arfidutor, meaning you can try to blow up a set card again. But keep in mind that the re-equip effect is a hard once per turn, so you can't keep using that effect to pass it between monsters over and over again to keep sniping back row. It's not always the most useful of the arms, but it's a great way to punish trap-reliant decks who are really set in their ways. Noble Arms Caliburn is another example of an ignition effect we can use multiple times. The equipped monster gains 500 attack, and once per turn, you can have it grant you 500 life points. Pop and re-equip it, and you can get another 500, so you're gaining up to 1,000 life points each turn with this in rotation. The 500 attack boost isn't huge, but can decide key battles considering how good the attack stat of our Noble Knights usually are. As for the life point gain, there isn't really anything you're paying for in the theme that this balances out. Well, there wasn't anything until Clarent showed up, that is. I think it's supposed to reference one of the legends where Excalibur's scabbard healed the user, but I think it's a lot simpler than that. The life point gain helps keep you from taking Caliburn damage. Noble Arms of Destiny prevents the destruction of the equipped monster once per turn. While not an ignition effect, this can be reset if we use the destruction re-equip effect of the Noble Arm. However, that's going to be a tall order trying to get that set up in a way that it can protect a single monster multiple times in one turn. It's much more likely that the initial monster will absorb 2 different forms of destruction, then Destiny will be passed on to someone else, and now your opponent's going to have to use 2 forms of removal against that monster. You know, if they don't already do that before taking care of the initial monster. But optimal play aside, I really like how the equip effect plays out thematically, especially with this card. It's like they're passing along their destiny to the next hero. That sounds like a really cool name. Someone should really make an archetype about that. Noble Arms Gallatin grants the equipped monster a cool 1000 attack boost, but during each of your standby phases, it loses 200 attack. Yeah, it's a stim pack retrain, how's that for recycling card design? Lore-wise, this is a reference to Sir Gawain, the wielder of Gallatin, growing weaker as the day went on. So this is a pretty apt reflection of that. Though, now that I think about it, that's actually not that special. Everyone gets weaker the longer they stay up. That's what being tired is, Gawain. We all experience it. Talk about being overdramatic. Noble Arms Clorent lets you pay 500 life points to allow the equipped monster to attack directly. Wow, you sure you want to let Noble Knight players do that? Like I said earlier, we do have an obelisk. Okay, sure, no problem with me. Just make sure to lock that thing back up when you're done using it, Madrot. Don't go using it to mortally wound your father, plunging the kingdom into a new dark age, okay? Okay, Madrot's a good kid. Our last Noble Arms equip spell breaks the mold a bit. Noble Arms Excalibur can only be equipped to a Noble Knight monster, not just any warrior. You can also control multiple, but it doesn't re-equip if destroyed. However, its effects are indispensable. The equipped monster can't be targeted by your opponent's card effects, and during your turn, except the turn it was sent to the grave, you can banish Excalibur from your grave, then target a Noble Knight Xyz monster you control. On resolution, you Xyz summon a Noble Knight Xyz monster with a different name as the targeted monster, using that targeted monster as material. Equip this alongside Destiny, and your Noble Knight is going to be sticking around for a long time. And the ability to change between your Xyz forms means you have a lot of flexibility. You can overturn your opponent's back row, pick off a strong monster, and with the inclusion of Sacred Custennin, Bryanak a bunch of cards back to the hand. No wonder so many people are fighting over this. Excalibur is an excellent weapon to exercise control of the duel. But would you believe it, we've got even more spells to talk about. Last chapter of the Noble Knights is a normal spell that you can only activate if you control no monsters and your opponent controls a monster. You can target a Noble Arms equipped spell and an appropriate Noble Knight monster in your grave, special summon that monster, then equip the spell to the summoned monster. When this came out, it felt like it was going to fix the deck's problem of rebuilding a board after your king had been dismantled. And it kinda does? It just doesn't do a very good job of following through on that, as almost anything you revive is going to be blown away by a stiff wind. If your opponent had interaction ready, you either needed to have Destiny or Excalibur, and it had to be whichever one actually helped keep your knights safe to even give them a chance at rebuilding your board. And that really felt disheartening. This card was released as part of a Noble Knight gift box along with Merlin and Bedivere, a product I bought more of than I care to admit, so it really did feel like the end of an era. There'd be no more support to latch onto that would be the card that would make Noble Knights meta. But you know, that didn't hold true. I'm glad we got more cards, but it's not much of a last chapter if you keep making sequels. You can't just Final Fantasy this. Noble Knights of the Round Table is a field spell that rewards the pilot who jams as many different Noble Knights into their deck as possible. During your end phase, you activate each of the following effects, depending on the number of Noble Knight cards with different names that are in your grave and or you control. With 3 or more, you send a Noble Knight card from your deck to the grave. With 6 or more, you special summon a Noble Knight monster from your hand, then equip a Noble Arms equip spell from your hand to that monster. At 9 or more, target a Noble Knight monster in your grave and add it to your hand. And if you have exactly 12, you get the most coveted effect in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! The 3 words that make duelists' hearts sing with joy. Draw a card. Ooh, I'm getting shivers just thinking about it. Okay, so it's not that good, but it is fun to resolve. The minimum effect keeps filling up the ranks to get progressively more effects. The 6 or more does the same thing, though the 9-1 technically takes one out of contention. And since it doesn't say you have to resolve the effects in sequence, if any of those effects cause you to meet the conditions of the other, they're fair game. For instance, the 9 or more can add a Noble Knight to your hand, which you can then special summon if you haven't done that already. It's a big flavor card meant to represent the power of the Arthurian Order of Knights, but unless something comes along that takes advantage of its multiple effects more efficiently, we're gonna have to table it for now. Glory of the Noble Knights is a quick play spell that has you targeting a Noble Knight monster you control and equipping any equip spell from your deck that can equip to that target. Finally, after all these years, it took until Extreme Force, but it finally happened! We actually got a card that searches Noble Arms! And not only that, but any appropriate equip card. It may not come up super often, but if you want to slap a United We Stand onto one of your knights for a big attack boost, the option is there. Especially since it's a quick play spell, so even if you don't want to be that cheeky, you can throw Gallatin onto one of your monsters once your opponent's committed to an attack. It's certainly no damage step Kalut, but it's the next best thing. And to go along with that is the long-awaited Noble Knight search spell, Heritage of the Chalice. It's a normal spell that adds a Noble Knight or Noble Arms card from your deck or grave to your hand. And if your Noble Knight monster equipped with a Noble Arms equip spell is destroyed by battle specifically and sent to the grave while Chalice is in the grave, you can add Chalice to your hand, but you can only activate one effect per turn and only once per turn. After losing 2 copies of Reinforcement of the Army since the launch of the Archetype, it's good to see we've got another card that can help smooth out our hands, especially because it can be a Noble Knight or Arm depending on the hand we're working with, so it's very helpful. And while being destroyed by battle while holding a Noble Arm isn't a fantastic trigger to get the card back, it does still have that element of recursion, which is important. We can only put Borza's Novelty Cup in the washer so many times before it starts chipping away at the gold leaf, so recycling is very important. But you know what a deck that's going to fill up its back row with equip spells needs? Trap cards, of course. Avalon is a normal trap that has you targeting 5 Noble Knight monsters in your grave, including at least 1 Artorigus and at least 1 Lancelin, banishing those targets, and if you do, destroy all cards on the field. Holy goodness, this card is just so frustrating. While the Artorigus part of the equation isn't that bad, the Lancelin part is horrendous. Our 2 options are a main deck monster we want to play as few of as possible, and an extra deck monster that's ridiculously hard to summon. All in service to a symmetrical board wipe? Sure, if you have Destiny on board, it'll keep the monsters safe, but for all the setup, the payoff just isn't there. Also, don't think I don't see you hiding over there, Arfiduder. We all see the mess you made. Now come over here this instant and help us put Artorigus' organs back where they're supposed to be. Until Noble Arms are needed once again is much better. It's a normal trap that excavates the top cards of your deck equal to the number of Noble Arms equip spells you control. And if you do, add 1 to your hand, also place the remaining cards on top of your deck in any order. You can also banish this card from your grave except the turn it was sent to the grave to special summon a Noble Knight from your deck with a different name from the ones you control and are in your grave. So it's effectively a jar of greed, but you get to pick which card off the top of your deck is best for you, and a way to mobilize more Noble Knights even during your opponent's turn. It's even a valid selection with Borza's effect, so it's searchable, or it can be sent right to the grave for the summon effect later on. This card may be a bit slow, but it gets off the field fairly quickly, and does a great job getting us to the Noble Arms we need, once again. Okay, that's all the Noble Knight cards. Ish. See, there's this weird quirk in their naming conventions. In the OCG, Noble Knights and Noble Arms are known as Holy Knights and Holy Sword, respectively, which is more than a little awkward because there are quite a few other cards that share those names. So in the interest of making sure we cover all of them, let's get those out of the way real quick. First, we have our Noble Arms adjacent cards. We've already talked about Denel and Brave Token Explained, but to sum it up, if we aren't playing any of the theme's monsters, it doesn't matter that it can equip to anything, it's not doing anything for us. Celestial Sword Iatos is a bit better. It's played by Raphael in the anime, which makes it part of the Guardian cycle of cards, and it's not terrible. It gives the same 500 attack boost as Caliburn, but doesn't do anything else for us unless we're somehow on Guardian Iatos. Funny novelty card, but not much in the way of playability. Celtic Guard of Noble Arms is a really funny one and very gimmicky. It's not bad stat-wise, having 2100 attack on a normal summon isn't anything to sneeze at, but it's held back by only being able to attack if you have no cards in hand. It's got a cool draw effect though, but the rest of the card synergies involve Celtic Guard monsters, of which there are now 3. So keep a lookout for the Future Core set Rage of the Duelist, which introduces a whole new wave of Celtic Guards to update the theme. These next few cards are actually used by 5D's character Sherry LeBlanc, rival turned enemy turned ally. While she's widely known for her Fleer cards, she actually has a few Noble Knights as part of her strategy, though none of them work particularly well with the ones we've already established. Joan doesn't so much float into another warrior as let you exchange a card in your hand for a level 4 or lower warrior in your grave when destroyed. Shield Bearer lets you banish a light monster in your grave to draw a card on summon, but otherwise is meant to work with winged beasts. Spear Holder can be tributed to add any equip spell from your deck to your hand, but is otherwise predisposed to setting up Fleer Synchron plays. And Horse of the Floral Knights adds a light Noble Knight monster from your deck to your hand on summon, which is pretty neat, and a confusion summon for a monster that's usually going to be Centaur Mina, but it has nothing to do with Noble Knights proper. Though I would like to point out that the Beast and the Warrior monsters fuse into a Beast Warrior monster, which is a nice touch. These cards technically work with the theme, so if you want to have some fun, please play them to the best of your ability. But if you're looking to take games consistently, well, let's face it, you and I aren't Sherry LeBlanc, so let's leave the pro-level dueling to her, okay? Alright, that's all the Noble Knight cards, but what do we do with them? Well, that's the tricky thing, isn't it? Original Noble Knights were built on the foundation of building up Artoricus or High Launcelin and riding them to victory, but now there are too many ways to out a single big monster. Kaijus exist now, and even without them, it's not like anything makes your Noble Knights unaffected by card effects, so most decks can leverage enough interaction to take you out regardless. And with more Noble Knight support, we've gained new avenues of play, but have lost the ability to toolbox outside our theme due to the number of restrictions placed on us now. So we'll have to pivot with the cards we've got. Using cards like Kustenin and Ivan, we'll try to summon as many Noble Knights as possible, leveraging their unique skills to overwhelm our opponent with a united front of fierce fighters, going into our Xyz as needed to solve problems, rather than use them as the focal point for our setups. But what can we play to help them out? Card advantage is going to be at a premium, and since our Noble Knight extra deck monsters cap out at 5 different names, we could run 3 of each and play Pot of Extravagance, though it may be more prudent to make room for some Nightmare monsters so you can use their effects before getting locked into only Noble Knight summons. Speaking of useful off-theme cards, Fireflint Lady saw usage in those Warrior Link decks, and I see little reason why we can't do the same here. They make for easy Isolde material, or they can be used to get another Noble Knight out of your hand. Sure, we're trying to avoid Infernobles, but I didn't say we were trying to avoid Fire Warriors in general. But while we're on the subject, Immortal Phoenix Gearfried is another fantastic addition from other lists. It's everything we want in a boss monster. Big stats, works with equipped cards, and has negates. Get this out soon enough, and you'll have a good amount of insulation against your opponent's plays. As for utility equipped cards, Assault Armor is a pretty great way to close out games. Give a double attack to a 4000 attack Sacred Artoricus, and all you need is a Clarent activation to close things out. Or, if you want to get very gimmicky, add in a Bamboo Sword engine. Send Cursed Bamboo Sword as part of Isolde's effect, triggering the search for a golden Bamboo Sword. Then you just need to equip another Cursed Sword to one of your monsters, something Glory of the Noble Knights can easily handle, and you've got a Pot of Greed. Just, you know, if you do that, make sure you ignore everything I said about Extravagance, because those two do not mix well. As for a silly tech pick, try out Magnum Shield. It can only be equipped to warrior monsters, which isn't a problem for us, and the monster gains attack equal to its original defense if it's in attack position, and defense equal to its original attack if it's in defense position. This can make Brothers an actually legitimate threat on the offensive, but is otherwise an incredible boost for all of our Xyz monsters, putting King Artoricus and Sacred Kustenin at 4000 attack and defense each, while Sacred Artoricus becomes 4400. That's more of a boost than Caliburn and Gallatin combined, so you can save some back row space for other cards, like more Magnum Shields. Nothing about it says you can't have more than one after all. And that's all I've got to say about Noble Knights. I love them from the bottom of my heart, and despite never quite reaching the level of competitive play I would have wanted, without a massive rework that is, I'll always appreciate them for being one of the decks that got me back into the game. Because playing as a knight with a bunch of cool weapons really connected with a part of me that just really loves games, and their ability to help us inhabit a role that brings us joy and maybe a little bit of escapism along the way. Thanks again, Noble Knights. I don't think I'd be the duelist I am today without you. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Do you enjoy stacking a bunch of equipment on a Noble Knight and watching big number turn into even bigger number? Or is the whole swords and chivalry thing not up your alley? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video around. It really does a lot to help me out. And if you want to help fund me in my quest to make helpful guides to all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, check out my YouTube channel membership or Patreon, and you can get some pretty sweet perks to go along with it. In fact, I'd like to take this time to thank my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, CozyBoat275, who selected today's video, Nebula Navigators Benjamin Meisner, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Gloomba331, Maven, Panther J, Shep Shao Shep, The Wizard Moose and the Fresh Prince of Conair, Cosmic Crusaders, Chaz Ghost, Colin Todd, George Schaefer, Hakatana, the Legendary Raven and Panda PLS, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. And if you want to see my original video on Infernoble Knights, you can find it right here. Just be careful of the quality, it's a pretty old one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.